documentary for my family. My mother Della, myself, my 2 brothers, my 2 sisters, my 4 children, my nieces, my nephews, and anyone to come after. I'm also doing this documentary for any of those people who are just like me, a part of the 60s Scoop generation, looking to find out more about your language, your culture, or your family. I want everyone to know that's ready to embark on this journey, that it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter what part of life you're in, that this is so worthwhile. And although I know that I've only scratched the surface, I know that this is going to change my family's lives moving forward. Over a year ago, my mother and I started collecting data that we had, knowing that we were going to embark on this journey. We collected photographs, we collected birth dates, and we made a family tree of our best recollections of memories, even though we know we hadn't confirmed it yet. We knew from this data collection that we had one picture of my grandmother. It's one coffee-stained photo of my grandmother, and at the time we thought her name was Maria, which later out throughout filming and throughout meeting people and learning that her name was actually pronounced Mariah. We also know that we had a photograph of my grandfather, and he's on this white, beautiful speckled horse. And we knew him at the time as Sparrow. We didn't know his full name. We didn't know what he had accomplished in his life. So through filming and again through meeting family members and learning more about him, we actually found that my grandfather was a part of World War II. And we found this out when we were looking and researching for information on the BC Archive website. And we had entered in his name and his birth date. And we had found out that he was not only just a part of World War II, he had actually lost his status for joining, which he ended up getting later on again. But for my family growing up, we had never really associated any connection with those days, such as Indigenous Veterans Day or Remembrance Day. So I do know that moving forward with my family and my children and my children's children, that we will have a lot more connection with those days, and we will always have something to remember. Do you remember when you met your mom?
Oh, I never did. My real mom? No, I've never met her. I don't remember her. I was pretty young when we were taken away. I think I was a year or something. I don't remember. But my sister had the opportunity to meet her. I lived in the same town that she lived in, Chase, BC. I went to high school. After elementary, I was bused to Chase, which is another little town between Salmon Arm and Kamloops, and we went to school every day. And I used to walk downtown for lunch and back during lunch, the whole high school years, and she lived in the same small town as where I was going to high school, and I never knew it. And, well, me and Cindy went to high school and never knew she lived in Chase. So she never looked us up, and we were under impression she was either passed away or that she was living in Vancouver or somewhere. We were told a lot of different stories as her whereabouts, but no one knew or told us. So, and after a while, we just never, it wasn't something we were interested in finding out, because we figured if she was close by, she would come find us. But then we just never thought about it because we were teens by then and was trying to start our own life and families. So it's just something you don't think about, something you just don't question anymore. Later on, when I was married, I think, and the kids were young, I moved to Vancouver for a bit. Then I moved to Salmon Arm for a short bit, and that's when I got a hold of my brother. And when I got a hold of my brother, he was living at a house at Piers Point in Salmon Arm. And I had a short visit on the way back to Calgary. It was a very short visit. It was half an hour, I think. And I met my brother. He was very young, and at the time he lived with my grandfather. And my grandfather was very old. I think he was 90 or so. And he lived in the house. It was his house, and my brother was coaxing me to go in and meet my grandfather, and I was too shy, too reserved. I was too shy. He had to pull me out of the car, and then I was shy enough meeting him, and he was all talkative, which was the opposite of me because I was super shy, so he was trying to talk and telling me stories and stuff, and he made it all sound natural. And me, I was too shy, and I'd listen, but I wasn't really taking it in. But he was really outgoing, which wasn't me at the time, but he talked a lot and telling stories, and he got me to go into the house, and there my grandfather sat, and he was watching TV, or tall, skinny, older native, and telling me that who I was, and Cindy, or Della, Cindy was also, he was introducing me, and I was all trying to leave. I didn't want to know him. I didn't know anything about him, and he seemed to know me. He knew my family and everything, but he was all talkative too, but I was all waiting to get out and run away. But they talked to me for a little bit, but I was interested in meeting my other brothers, and I was asking James, when do I get to meet the others, and why don't you take me now, or do they live in town? And he says I can't meet them because they all passed away. So that surprised me, because I thought they were all living at different foster homes is the last thing I knew. But at that time, he says I couldn't meet them. So that's when I kept coming back to Calgary. And that's where I raised my kids, back in Calgary. So we were in Salmon Arm for a short time.
So in the beginning of filming, I really wanted to get back out onto the land with my mother, something that my people used to do. And I wanted to, for Mother's Day, bring her horseback riding. I remember as a child, my mother always saying that she had a horse growing up and she was always on a horse. And I know since we lived in Calgary our whole lives that she had never got to do that after she had children. So for Mother's Day, I decided to bring her out horseback riding, and it was beautiful. She was so happy and so cheerful. Her cheeks were even red. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad I can do this for my mother. Looking back on the film of my grandfather's photo of where he's sitting on this white, beautiful speckled horse, it's funny to see that when we went horseback riding on Mother's Day, my mother was paired with a horse that was white and speckled, just like him. We never got a chance to pick our horses, so I thought that was a huge coincidence. And when I pointed it out to my mother, she really appreciated that. We started off this journey, and we knew we had to take a road trip, well, multiple road trips down to British Columbia. And we're from Calgary, Alberta, and this is where we spent our whole lives. And so we knew we'd have to travel back. And one of the first trips we went on, we traveled back to Neskonlith Indian Band. So when we showed up to the Neskonlith Indian Band, I thought that they would have all the answers, and however, they did not. They didn't know who we were. They had to search for our band registry number in the database. And because we've never been really associated with them, they really didn't have a lot of answers to our questions. So I thought in the beginning, this was going to be, they're going to help us, they're going to point us in the right direction. And it turns out that they really didn't.
Grew up in Slista, BC, which is off the Shuswap Lake. We were about a mile from the lake, up a mountain in a farming community. We had 120 acres on the farm, and we had a few animals. We had about 120 cows, 2 horses and a dog, chickens. Used to have sheep until I got rid of them because they're hard to keep without catching a disease, so got rid of the sheep. And a lot of cats. I remember the farm cats, we had about 50. They kept having kittens because they were wildish. And I had a sister I grew up with and my foster parents. So I stayed there until I was 18. My sister Cindy, she married when she was 17. She left early and started her own household with her husband. Her husband ran a restaurant, so at the age of, when I was 17 or 16, I started being a waitress there, and that was my first job. So I also was the dishwasher, cashier, and helped and made a small wage. That was my first job, so I was able to contribute to my own things that I wanted, like the clothes, spend it the way I wanted.
Do you remember anything before the car ride? Do you remember your life before the car ride?
I don't remember anything. It's all blank. I was only a year and a half. I was a little one, but when you're that little, you don't try to remember things. You're just along for the ride. So when I went to that farm, I think I was a year and a half. So not many kids that young would pay attention to anything much. Like, they got me so young that I was in a different foster home before that, but there was 12 kids, I remember one big table, and it's one that we visited where my brother was. So one of my brothers was in a foster home, and she looked after 12 foster kids who I remember visiting there, or maybe at a later date, maybe visited, and they had a big table with a lot of chairs, and she looked after a lot. So I think that's how they found a home for me, because they probably knew each other.
When did you learn you were adopted or know you were fostered?
When I was a bit older, we never thought about it. We're just used to having white parents, my sister being like me. And we weren't around much other people, and I noticed a difference when I started grade 1 in elementary. When I got older, there was no kindergarten, so we all went straight to grade 1. And I've never been around other kids, never visited. I didn't ever see other kids. So when I was dropped, my sister was older, so she already been to grade 1, and she had her own little friends. And then I went to grade 1 myself, and I was looking around for her and wondering why she couldn't be in my grade, or we were inseparable. But it was traumatizing when she went off to school, left me by myself on the farm, and couldn't understand why she kept every day leaving. I didn't know what school was until one day I was taken to school. And I was put in a room with all these kids, and I've never been around kids before, only my sister and maybe other cousins that came by, and that was rare. So I was put in a room full of kids running around, and I was traumatized, scared. So I took off and hid in a coat closet and my foster mom, she kept trying to coax me out of the coat closet and trying to pull me out, and at the same time not to try to be embarrassed, but I was really hiding amongst the coats and there was boots and there was no getting me out for the life because I didn't know what the other kids, why I was there. I thought she was going to leave me there, not come back maybe, or took her a long time, and it was one of my best friends later, another kid, which had red hair, which made it worse because I've never seen a kid with red hair, but she went in the closet after me, and she was very talkative, and she was used to a lot of kids and people, I guess, and she went in there and she talked me out after half an hour of wanting to come out to play with her and stuff, but it made it a lot better, and I guess I came out after a while. And then my foster mom, she said she had to go. She kept telling me she had to go, and I figured she was leaving me there, and I didn't know what she was doing, but I probably was crying until that friend of mine, and she took me out, and then I was able to go every day to class and taking a bus. I think we took a bus. We took a bus there and back after that, so it was quite a walk to the bus stop, and getting on the bus with all these kids was another thing, but we got used to that too. So then I finally got the gist of what school was, but I didn't at the time differentiate the color of my skin, or because I had the best friend that had flame red hair, so we all, I guess, were different colors in our different ways. I had brown hair, she had red hair, so we didn't really differentiate the color of our skin. We weren't racist, of course, we're just kids, so we grow up with everyone in that school was white, except me and my sister were the only natives in the whole school, and that didn't faze us either, because like I said, my friend had red hair, and there was others with black hair maybe, and short hair, and there was boys and girls with long hair, so the color of the skin didn't mean much different, and we didn't tease each other because everyone's different anyways. So as children, you only grow up we weren't allowed to tease each other and treat everyone the same.
So on this journey, we decide to order an ancestry DNA kit, and we decide to test my mother. I know that I've been tested in the past, but that doesn't really help me because that's my mother's and my father's side. And I wanted to know more about her sides.
This is hard. Guess I'm just not a spitter. Inside, oh here, inside. This goes in here.
So in one of the trips back to British Columbia, we wanted to visit the gravesite where my mother's mother was located. And when we did show up, it was the most beautiful place that I think I've ever seen, and I would love to be laid to rest there. It had the beautiful mountains surrounding it. It had a beautiful river right beside it. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we showed up there with such high hopes, and we had allocated a half a day towards let's find her. It's not that big of a cemetery. Let's do this. So when we showed up, we were kind of disappointed because we learned that at least 50% of these grave sites were unnamed, and the ones that were named were falling apart, and they were crumbling, and they were eroding right before our eyes. And so we had high hopes still, and we started trudging through this long, tall grass. And we walked and we walked and we read names, and we thought, okay, let's do this alphabetically. And although we did it alphabetically, we could not find my grandmother. And I could tell at halfway through the afternoon that my mother had given up. And I had such a good feeling that we were going to find her. And so I kept searching with her, and we kept going back and forth from gravestone to gravestone. And I know how my mother is, and I know her actions, and I know that she suppresses things and keeps things deep down. But because I know her as a person, I know that halfway through she had given up, and she was doing it more for my sake. It was so awful because I could see my mother's face, and I remember thinking, I hope my children never have to feel that feeling of searching for someone that you never knew, and now that you want to know them so bad that you can't find them. And I know I would be furious if my children couldn't find me when they were actually looking for me and needed me. So I know we'll be back, but it was unfortunate that we couldn't find her. I was sitting in my office and I was looking at the screen, and there was a discovery of 215 children at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And I remember looking at the screen in shock and awe. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how's my uncle feeling? At that moment, my uncle had called me and he said, I know you're on this journey. I would love for you to come down and share this part of my life with me. And I said, yes, of course. When we showed up, there was hundreds and hundreds of people that were paying their respects to the Kamloops Indian residential survivors. And we walked through the crowds, and I remember listening to my uncle tell me horrific stories. And he was also telling me wonderful stories of where he learned to play ice hockey. But there was also awful, awful stories of what they made those children do growing up. My uncle was a 10-year survivor of the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And on that day, when I was walking around with him, I could see a weight lifted in his shoulders and a lighter step to him, as he knew that all the people that were there and the news across the country, that people finally believed him and the stories his survivors had told over the years. You could tell that he was thinking, they finally believe us, and it's out there. And you could tell that something had changed huge in him. And I, to this day, know that he feels heard, and he feels like his stories that he's told over the years are finally listened to by not just those that believe him, but by those who were doubtful. So early on into filming, I had received a phone call from my uncle, and he was saying that my mother's mother's sister had passed. And at that point in time into this process, we didn't even know that my mother's mother had a sister. So this all came to a shock to us. And so he invited us both down to the wake and the ceremony. And of course, we said yes. We wanted to pay our respects to family, even if we didn't know them. And this was a good opportunity for us to meet people that we had never got to meet before. So we jumped in the car and we drove from Alberta to British Columbia. And when we showed up to the house that it was being held in, me and my mother were so apprehensive and we were so scared. We didn't want to go in. What if they don't like us? What if they really don't want us here? We kept thinking. So my uncle, he saw us that we were sitting in the vehicle for so long, and he had actually come out and knocked on the window, and he then brought us in with him. And when we entered into the living room, we could see this sea of faces. And first off, these faces all looked just like me and my mother and my family, which was just so amazing because I had never, ever met anybody that looked like us besides our own immediate family. So that in itself was amazing. And when we sat down, it was like a whole sea of voices that wanted to ask questions and tell stories, and they each wanted our attentions. And I remember sitting there listening, and they all knew so much about us, which was so strange, I found. But I guess putting the pieces together later on, I now know that my uncle, who we had a relationship with, was always relaying information such as my children and accomplishments and anything that we had done in our lives. So it's just strange that they knew so much about us and we didn't even know they existed. So that was wonderful. We met so many kind people that day that were family, and they invited us back and they opened their homes to us. And I know we'll be back, and I can't wait to bring my kids back to meet them. And I can't wait to have a lifetime with them.